I'm Carla. This is Quilting with Carla. Today I'm going to teach you how to make half square triangles using the shortcut sheet techniques. Shortcut sheets are going to be released in Houston on October 23rd. We're very excited about that. There's five, there may be six, we'll wait and see. But each sheet gives you directions on how to make a lot of something, in this case, half square triangles, using a sheet method where you're sewing strips together and then slicing them apart and maybe sewing them again and maybe slicing them apart. Every technique is a little bit different. All you need is a quilting ruler and a rotary cutter for each of these techniques. So let's get started. The cutting for some of the color combinations. I've done the ones for here. I've done the other light one, which is these two colors. And I've already sewn one, which I'll show you in a minute. And this is the light background, which is going to go with this particular color. This pattern is for 2-inch finished size, 2.5-inch unfinished size half square triangles. They're pretty small. The strip width we need to cut to make them is 2¼ inches. I cut my fabric using nothing. In fact, the whole technique is nothing but a ruler, a rotary cutter, and a big mat. I tuck my fabric underneath my ruler and I cut that way. So what you're looking at is a yard of fabric. It's been folded, it's been trimmed, so there's no folds left. So now I have 4 layers and I'm cutting the width of fabric to get my 2¼ inch strips. And I like to use the ruler to measure. It's way more precise. Different mats are obviously made a little differently, but I've had mats that actually have stretched with time and so no longer were accurate, so I always cut with my ruler. Nice sharp rotary blade. I use the lines on my ruler and slice the fabric that way. It's hard for me to see when I've made a cut, so I like to remove my little set and then put my ruler down again. There's 4 layers. I'm going to make 7 cuts. That gives me 28 pieces. I've done that with each of the other fabrics already. Doesn't take very long to cut the fabric. Always press it in advance as well, so there's no little crinkles that get in the way with measuring it properly. I like to use batiks when I use this method. Shortcut sheets in all cases are, well, as they say, they're shortcuts. So in order to do that, you have to sometimes compromise on some of your other quilting standards. One of them being the use of bias. A lot of my little blocks end up being on the bias. I don't have any problems with that. I'm careful how I handle it. I use batiks which have a little less stretch and hasn't been an issue. And again, it's a shortcut sheet. You'll see and judge for yourself the benefits. So these two are going to go together. That's all my cutting done for this pattern. Then I've taken the strips and I've sewn them up alternately. I press my seams open. I'm going to show you a little tool I like to press with. It's called a strip stick. It comes in different lengths. Comes full width of fabric. Because I'm cutting and sewing only half width of fabric, I can still use it over on my ironing board. But what it does is that it raises up the seam that I'm pressing. And because it's been raised up, I'm not accidentally pressing something in the wrong direction that I've already done flat. So this is a very, very handy little tool called a strip stick. Now I've sewn all my strips together for 2 color combinations. So you can see it is a very, very, very long. I'm not even going to stretch the whole thing out because I've already folded it nicely to keep it out of my way, but it's a very long strip. There is no restriction to how long your strip can be. It can be from here to China if you want. What matters is that you've cut your 2¼ inch, you've sewn the 1/4 inch seam, you've pressed it open, and you have it nice and straight. From that point on, it just doesn't matter how long it is. We're going to start cutting on the diagonal. My first cut is going to be as close to the 2½ inch mark as I can. That's because my blocks are going to be 2½ inches. So I'm going to go with my ruler and a diagonal line. For my first cut, I can use the cutting mat as long as my seam is straight. So my seam is straight, my 45 is here on the cutting mat. I'm going to move it over just a hair. Make sure my seam is still straight. 1½ there, 1½ there. And my first cut then will just be, I don't want to start in the wrong place because I could lose as much as 1 whole unit off the other end if I don't just take the minimum at this side. From this point on, I'm cutting using my ruler to measure, and from time to time I'm checking to make sure that I'm still straight. Here's the line in my ruler. You can see that carefully. This is the line in my ruler. That's my 45. I put it on the seam, and I'm checking one of my other lines to make sure I'm still straight. And then I'm backing it up, and I'm doing my 2½ inch now. Cut a couple more strips, and then you'll see how we take them apart. See if I'm still straight. Here's my line, goes right on one of my seams. My bottom edge of my ruler still straight on the fabric edge. So I can keep going with a couple more 2½ inch. Now you can see my ruler is not going to be long enough, and I'll show you how we deal with that as well. 2½ inches. Oops, that's 1½. That would not be a good idea. 2½. See, I'm getting to the point where my ruler is no longer wide enough, and here's how we deal with that. I start at one end, line up my 2½, start my cut, hold the blade down, slide the ruler forward, make sure you still have a 2½, and complete the cut. I'll cut one more piece so you can see how it's done. Let me just check to make sure I'm still straight. Now it's off just a tiny bit, and I'm going to adjust for that. Make sure my fabric's flat. Here's my seam. Partly because I should have this draped off the end of my table. I have it folded because of the camera, but try that one more time before I make the correction that I'm off a bit. I'm going to fix that. Looks like I'm off about a 1/4 inch. Doing that in the right direction. So I'm too big here by about a 1/4 inch. So I'm fine at that end. I'm a 1/4 inch off here. I'm going to slide my ruler down. Make sure I'm still on the cut. And make one more cut so you can see it. 2½ inches. You can run a piece of masking tape along your line. If you're doing a lot of cuts, it's sometimes easier. Hold the ruler, slide the ruler up, hold the rotary cutter in. And continue to cut. Now here you're wondering probably, how does that make a half square triangle? Well, let me show you. You can use the big ruler at this point, it doesn't matter. I sometimes switch to a smaller one. What you're cutting are these points, the bottom to the opposite one on the top. Just line them up and cut. The first piece, you're going to just put it on your ruler at 2.5. And then keep going point to point. And that's how fast it is to make half square triangles. Point to point. When you look at the back of them, there's sometimes a little tag. Just slice those off. I do that as I'm going. If I don't, sometimes I get in the way of my seam when I'm sewing my pieces together. So I just make a point of taking them off right now. Now what's going to happen is you're going to end up with a whole pile of these the same. As I said, you can sew as many pieces together as you want. Here's how they measure up. 2.5 and 2.5, so they're looking pretty good. When I start to put my pattern together, I've got my diagonals absolutely perfect. When I do my right sides together, I know I'm going to take my 1/4 inch seam and it'll be 100% dead on, which is of course what we want when we join them up together. So thank you for joining. This is Quilting with Carla. These are half square triangles made in the shortcut sheet method. And check back to our website. That pattern will be available very soon. It's kitsbycarla.com.